Before I sign anything, I asked the attorney to stop. The room went quiet. My son-in-law's lawyer, a polished man in a gray suit who charged $400 an hour, lowered his pen and looked at me the way people look at elderly relatives who've wandered off the path at a family reunion. Patient, condescending, waiting for the confusion to pass. My daughter, Sylvia, sat across the table from me. She had her mother's eyes. I used to love that about her. Right then, looking at those eyes, I felt something I hadn't felt in 63 years of living, the specific cold of being completely alone in a room full of people. "Dad," she said, "we've been over this. Just sign." I reached into the inside pocket of my sport coat and pulled out a folded envelope. White, letter-sized. My name tacked on the front in a font I'd printed myself at the library on Sycamore Street 2 days before. I set it on the table between us. "Before I do," I said, "I need everyone in this room to look at what's in here." 48 hours earlier, I was sitting in a booth at Patsy's Diner on Route 9 outside Mooresville, North Carolina, drinking the worst cup of coffee I'd had since my Army days. The man across from me was named Clifton Bray. He'd been a fraud investigator for the IRS for 22 years before he retired and started doing private work. A mutual friend had given me his number. Clifton was 61, wore reading glasses on a chain around his neck, and had the kind of face that had seen too much to be surprised by anything. He slid a folder across the table. "I'm sorry, Frank," he said. "I know this isn't what you were hoping for." I hadn't told him what I was hoping for. I hadn't told myself either, not out loud. But the truth was, I'd been hoping he would find nothing. That I'd been paranoid. That grief had made me suspicious of the wrong people. That the last 2 years of watching my estate slowly restructured around me, piece by piece, had just been family trying to help an old man navigate paperwork he didn't fully understand. The folder told a different story. My name is Frank Delacroix. I'm 64 years old. I worked 31 years as a civil engineer for Mecklenburg County before I retired. My wife, Patricia, passed away 2 years ago from pancreatic cancer. We were married for 38 years. We had one daughter, Sylvia. She married a man named Derek Holt 7 years ago. They have 2 kids, my grandchildren, Emma, who's 5, and Connor, who's 3. When Patricia died, she left everything to me. The house in Mooresville, the rental property in Concord, the investment accounts we built together over 4 decades of careful living, and the small lake cabin in Iredell County that my father built with his own hands in 1967 and that I've been going to every summer since I was 3 years old. The total value of the estate was just over $900,000. Not rich by any stretch. Just 2 people who worked hard and didn't waste what they earned. Derek had offered to help me with the estate paperwork after Patricia died. He's a real estate broker. Said he understood these things. Said family should take care of family. I was 62, newly widowed, and I didn't know the first thing about trust documents and asset transfers and beneficiary designations. I was grateful. I should not have been grateful. Clifton flipped open the folder and started at the beginning. "The first transfer happened 9 months after your wife passed," he said. "The rental property in Concord. Derek had you sign a property management agreement that included a clause transferring operational control to an LLC he controls. The LLC is called Holt Property Solutions. It's registered in Delaware." I remembered signing that. Derek had brought it over on a Sunday afternoon. Said it was standard, that it would make managing the rental easier, less headache for me. I read the first page and the last page, which is what I'd always done with county documents. It was a mistake I will never make again. "The rental income has been going into the LLC account since last March," Clifton said. "Approximately $2,200 a month. 14 months. That's just over $30,000 that has not come to you." I stared at the page. "The investment accounts are more complicated," he continued. "You added Derek as a co-trustee on the Patricia Delacroix Family Trust last November. Do you remember that?" I remembered it differently than he was about to tell it to me. I remembered Sylvia crying at the kitchen table, telling me she was worried about me, that I'd lost weight, that I wasn't sleeping, that I seemed overwhelmed. She said Derek just wanted to help manage things, take the burden off me. I thought I was doing something kind for my daughter, letting her feel useful. letting her feel like she was taking care of her father the way I'd always taken care of her father, the way I'd always taken care of her. As co-trustee, Clifton said, Derek has been making quarterly withdrawals from the Fidelity account under the category of trustee management fees, 12% annually. Your portfolio has lost approximately $68,000 in management fees over 14 months that went to him personally. I didn't say anything. There was nothing to say yet. The cabin is the part that took me the longest to untangle, Clifton said. He took his glasses off and cleaned them, which I was starting to understand was something he did when he was about to deliver the part that hurt most. 3 months ago, Derek filed a deed transfer for the Iredell County property, the cabin. He used a quitclaim deed. Your signature is on it. I never signed a quitclaim deed for the cabin. Clifton looked at me steadily. I know. I had a handwriting analyst look at it. The signature was traced. It matches your signature from the property management agreement closely enough to pass a casual review, but under magnification, the pen pressure pattern is inconsistent. Someone copied it. The cabin. My father had felled the trees himself, had squared the logs with a broadaxe over 2 summers. I learned to fish from the dock out back when I was 5 years old. Patricia and I had spent our honeymoon there. I'd held Sylvia there the first summer of her life. I'd scattered some of Patricia's ashes in the water by the dock because she'd asked me to. I sat in that diner booth for a long time without speaking. How much? I finally asked. The cabin was transferred to another LLC, also controlled by Derek. Current assessed value is $240,000, but the property market up there has moved. Actual market value was closer to $310,000. And Sylvia, I said. Does she know? Clifton was quiet for a moment. That's the part I can't tell you for certain. The trust modification paperwork was countersigned by a notary. Sylvia was listed as a witness on 2 of the documents. Whether she understood what she was witnessing or whether Derek handled the paperwork and just needed her signature, I genuinely cannot say. I thought about my daughter. I thought about the girl who used to climb into my lap during thunderstorms, who called me every Sunday for 20 years without missing a single week, who stood next to her mother's hospital bed and held her hand for 6 hours straight without letting go. I thought about the fact that last month she'd asked me to sign a new document, consolidating the remaining accounts into a single trust, with Derek named as sole trustee. I was supposed to sign it today. What do I do? I asked Clifton. He folded his hands on the table. You have 2 choices, Frank. You sign those papers today and probably lose everything that's left. Or you walk in there with what I've given you and you stop the whole thing before it goes any further. If I do that, I don't know what it does to my relationship with Sylvia. I don't know what it does to my relationship with my grandchildren. I know that too. She might say I'm attacking her husband, that I'm a paranoid old man who doesn't trust his own family. She might. I looked out the window at the parking lot. A family was loading into a minivan. 2 little kids arguing about who got the window seat. A father settling it calmly. An ordinary Tuesday. Give me until tomorrow morning, I said. He pushed the folder across the table. It's yours. I'll be available by phone. I drove back to Mooresville and sat in the kitchen until 2 in the morning. Patricia's kitchen, still mostly her choices. The blue tile backsplash she'd picked out in 2003. The row of cookbooks she'd never stopped adding to. The coffee mug on the second shelf that said World's Okayest Fisherman that Emma had given me last Christmas with help from Sylvia. I thought about anger. I had plenty of it available. More than I knew what to do with. $30,000 in rent diverted. $68,000 in fabricated management fees. $310,000 worth of a cabin my father built with his hands. All of it drained away while I was grieving the woman I'd loved for 38 years. While I was trying to remember how to cook dinner for one person, while I was waking up at 3 in the morning reaching across an empty bed. But underneath the anger was something more complicated, because the person who had let this happen wasn't just Derek. Derek I could be angry at cleanly and without complication. Derek was my son-in-law, a man I'd welcomed into my family, danced with at his wedding, cheered for when he closed his first big listing. Derek, I now understood, was a man who had looked at a grieving 62-year-old and seen an opportunity. But Sylvia, whose name was on 2 of those documents, I picked up my phone 3 times to call her, set it back down 3 times. The fourth time, I didn't pick it up. I got in my car and drove to the library on Sycamore, and I printed out an envelope with my own name on it. When I set that envelope on the conference table, Derek's lawyer glanced at it and went very still. That stillness told me everything I needed to know about whether he already knew what his client had done. Derek himself was sitting at the far end of the table. He was 41, fit, the kind of man who looked like he belonged on a billboard for something. He'd been smiling when I walked in. The smile had changed when I put my hand in my pocket. "What's this?" Sylvia asked. "Go ahead and open it," I said. I looked at her, not at Derek. "Please." She looked at her husband. He gave her a small shake of his head. "Sylvia," I said, "please open the envelope." She reached across the table and picked it up, broke the seal, pulled out the papers inside. The first thing on top was a bank statement for Holt Property Solutions, LLC, with the rental income deposits highlighted in yellow. I watched her face. There are moments in life that split time into before and after. The moment I watched Sylvia read that first page was one of them. I saw her read it once quickly, then read it again slowly. I watched her eyes go to the date column, the amount column, the account number at the top that linked back to Derek's LLC. I watched her understand. "This is the rental income," she said quietly, "from the Concord property. It's been going into your husband's business account for 14 months, I said. "That can't be right. Keep reading." She turned the page. The investment account statements. The management fees. She turned another page. The quitclaim deed for the cabin. I watched the color change in her face. "What is this?" Her voice had gone very flat. The flatness was someone trying hard to control something that wants very badly to come out. Derek leaned forward. "Sylvia, don't." "What?" She set the papers down. She looked at her husband, and whatever she saw in his face answered the question she hadn't finished asking. I watched her realize something she had either not known or had not fully let herself know until this moment. "Derek." His lawyer put a hand on Derek's arm. "I need a moment with my client," the lawyer said. "What you need," I said, "is to hear the rest." I reached over and turned to the last page. The handwriting analysis report. 2 pages of technical language that ended with a clear conclusion. The signature on the quitclaim deed did not match my authentic signature. Someone traced my signature on a legal document transferring my property. That's not a civil matter. That's fraud. Potentially forgery under North Carolina statute. Derek's lawyer stood up. "Mr. Delacroix, I'd strongly advise you not to make accusations without—" "I'm not making accusations. I'm making observations. I'm making observations. Clifton Bray, a former IRS fraud investigator, made the accusations in a formal written report, which is also in that envelope." The room went quiet the way rooms go quiet when the thing that everyone has been pretending isn't happening suddenly becomes undeniable. Sylvia was looking at her husband. Derek was looking at her husband. Derek was looking at the table. "Is it true?" she asked. Her voice was barely audible. "The cabin. Did you forge his signature?" He said nothing. "Derek." Her voice was harder now. "Did you take money from my father while he was grieving my mother?" The silence lasted long enough that it answered for him. Sylvia stood up. She walked out of the conference room without picking up her purse or her phone or her jacket from the back of the chair. I heard her heels in the hallway and then nothing. I sat there for another moment. Then I gathered the papers back into the envelope and slid it across to Derek's lawyer. "You'll be hearing from my attorney," I said. "Not Sylvia's attorney, mine." I walked out of the building into a cold March afternoon. My hands were steady. I hadn't expected that. Let me back up. Let me tell you who I was before that conference room, before Patricia got sick, before I understood how fragile everything I'd built actually was. I grew up in Cabarrus County, the son of a man who could fix anything with his hands, and a woman who stretched a tight budget further than physics should have allowed. We weren't poor, but we weren't comfortable either. I worked summers at a hardware store from the time I was 15, paid my way through community college, transferred to NC State for my engineering degree. Took me 6 years. Worked the whole time. Graduated at 27. I met Patricia at a cookout the summer after I got my county job. She was a school librarian, soft-spoken, funny in her dry, quiet way that took you a minute to catch up to. We dated for 2 years and were married in September of 1986 in her parents' backyard in Kannapolis. I was 26. She was 24. We weren't looking for grand drama. We were looking for a good life, and mostly we found it. Sylvia came along in 1990. She was a serious child, curious about everything. The kind of kid who asked questions that made you go look things up. She got her mother's patience and, Patricia always claimed, my stubbornness. She did well in school, went to Appalachian State, got a degree in business, came home and built a career in marketing. She met Derek at an industry event in Charlotte. He was charming, confident, ambitious. He made her laugh. I liked him. I want to be clear about that. I genuinely liked my son-in-law for several years. He was good company. He was decent with the kids. He came to Thanksgiving and Christmas and helped with the dishes, and I thought, that's a good man. Then Patricia got sick. It was November 2021. Stage 4, the kind of diagnosis where the doctor's face tells you everything before the words do. She had 8 months. We spent them as well as you can spend 8 months, you know, or your last. At the cabin in the summer. Long drives on Sunday mornings. Watching old movies. Talking about things we'd been meaning to talk about for years and hadn't because we'd always assumed there was more time. She died in July 2022. The Tuesday, Emma had just turned 3. The months after were a blur. Not dramatic, just grey. Getting up, making coffee, answering the cards and letters, figuring out that there were things Patricia had always handled that I didn't know how to handle. Going to bed too early because the evenings were the hardest. Derek started coming around more. Helpful, attentive, bringing over casserole Sylvia had made, offering to sit with me and go through paperwork. I was touched by it. I thought my son-in-law was stepping up the way men were supposed to step up for family. The property management agreement was the first document. Then the co-trustee form. Then a few others I hadn't thought twice about. He was always there to explain them. Always had a reason that made sense if you weren't looking for the reason underneath the reason. I don't know exactly when the doubt started. Somewhere around month 10 or 11 of the new arrangement, little things, a rental payment that seemed late, a statement from Fidelity that showed a fee I didn't recognize. Derek always had explanations. I'm not a suspicious man by nature. I spent 31 years working for a government agency. I believed in process and documentation and people doing what they said they were going to do. But something didn't sit right. And eventually something not sitting right became enough to call Clifton Bray. That was 4 months before the conference room. I found Sylvia sitting in her car in the parking garage. She was gripping the steering wheel with both hands, staring straight ahead at the concrete wall. Engine off. I knocked on the passenger window. She unlocked the door. I sat down and we were both quiet for a while. I didn't know, she said finally. About the cabin. About all of it. I want you to know that I believe you. I signed some things. He asked me to sign things, and I signed them, and I didn't read them carefully enough, and She stopped. Her voice had cracked. Sylvia. I'm so sorry, Dad. I know he told me it was all standard, that he was simplifying things for you. I thought he was doing something good. I thought he loved this family. I looked at my daughter. She was 53 years old. My age, when I was first starting to think about retirement, and right now, she looked like the 8-year-old who used to come get me during thunderstorms. Not because she was weak, because she was someone who believed in the people she loved, and one of those people had let her down in a way that was going to take a long time to process. What I need to know, I said carefully, is where we go from here, you and me. She looked at me. What do you mean? I mean you're my daughter. Nothing that happened in that room changes that. But I need to know that you understand what your husband did. Not just to me, to us, to this family. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. I understand. And I need to know that Emma and Connor are going to be okay. Whatever happens between you and Derek, whatever you decide, those kids are going to have their grandfather. I'm not going anywhere. She made a sound that was almost a laugh and almost a sob. You're more worried about me than about yourself. I'm 64 years old, and I'm angry, but I'm not broken. You're the one who has to figure out what your marriage is or isn't after today." She nodded slowly. Then she said, "Did you really have that analyzed? The signature? I hired someone." "How long have you been carrying this?" "4 months." She shook her head. "You walked in there by yourself. You didn't tell me. You didn't ask for help. I didn't know who knew what. I still don't entirely. But I knew I needed to find out the truth before I signed anything else." She reached over and took my hand. We sat in a parking garage in Mooresville, North Carolina, father and daughter in the wreckage of something that was going to take a long time to sort through, holding on. That was 16 months ago. The legal process moved the way legal processes do, which is to say slowly and expensively, and with more paperwork than any human being should have to endure. Derek's lawyer tried to frame the LLC transfers as a misunderstanding, a miscommunication about the scope of the management agreement. The handwriting analysis report made that difficult to sustain. The district attorney's office opened an inquiry. Derek ultimately pled to a reduced charge, 2 years of supervised probation, and restitution. He had to dissolve both LLCs and transfer the assets back. The cabin came home. The marriage did not survive. Sylvia filed for divorce 8 months ago. It's not final yet. These things take time, especially with children involved. Seeing the kids are in the house in Huntersville. Derek moved into an apartment in South Charlotte. He sees Emma and Connor on alternating weekends. I help where I can. Wednesday evenings I pick up the kids from school so Sylvia can work late. Sunday mornings we do breakfast, all 4 of us, at a diner in Davidson, where they have a waffle that is approximately the size of a hubcap, and Connor insists on ordering it every single time, even though he never comes close to finishing it. Those Sunday mornings are the best part of my week. Sylvia and I really talked for the first time in years after everything came out. There's a kind of honesty that only becomes possible after something terrible. We talked about what her marriage had actually been like, about how Derek's charm had covered a lot of things she'd noticed and rationalized away. We talked about Patricia, about grief, about how both of us had been so focused on not falling apart that we hadn't really let ourselves fall apart, and how maybe that was something to look at. She started therapy. I joined a grief group at the church on Catawba Avenue. Neither of us is fixed, but we're both doing the work. The rental property in Concord is back in my name. The Fidelity account is being managed by an actual fiduciary now, a woman named Addie Chen, who charges a flat fee and sends me a quarterly report that I read every single word of. The cabin is the cabin. I went up there last October for the first time since before Patricia died. Drove up on a Saturday morning, unlocked the door, and just stood in the main room for a while. The fishing rods are still on the main room for a while. The fishing rods are still on the wall rack. The coffee maker is the old one from 1998 that Patricia refused to replace because she said it made better coffee than any of the new ones. The dock needs some boards replaced, a job I can do myself. I sat out on the dock that afternoon and watched the water until the light went flat and cold. I thought about my father who built this place without help from anyone. I thought about Patricia. I thought about what it means to fight for something, not with noise, not with anger for its own sake, just with patience and documentation, and the willingness to walk into a room alone when you have to. I am not a dramatic man. I spent 31 years measuring things, calculating load tolerances, making sure what I'd built would hold. I applied the same approach to this. There's a younger man in my grief group, 45, going through a divorce, convinced that everything he built is being stripped away from him and there's nothing he can do. Last week after the meeting, he asked me how I kept from losing my mind during all of it. I told him the truth. Some days I didn't. Some days I sat in Patricia's kitchen at 2 a.m. staring at the blue tile backsplash, too tired to be angry and too awake to sleep. Some days the weight of it was exactly as heavy as it looked. But I also told him this. The worst thing is not knowing. Once you know the truth, however ugly it is, you have something to work with. You have ground under your feet. Suspicion is the thing that will eat you alive. Certainty, even painful certainty, is something you can stand on. He nodded like he understood. I hope he did. Emma called me last week, which she does now on her own. I'm prompted just to talk. She's 6. The conversations are not long or deep. She told me her teacher's name, that Connor broke her crayon on purpose, that she wants a dog, and that she made me a picture at school that I can have when I come over on Wednesday. I told her I would put it on the refrigerator. She said, "Grandpa, do you have room?" "You already have so many." "I do. I have pictures from both of them covering most of the front of the refrigerator and a fair amount of the side. Some of them I'm not entirely sure what they're depicting, but I've never asked for clarification because I don't want to hurt anyone's feelings. I told Emma I would make room, and I will. Whatever needs to come down to make space for what matters, I will take it down. That is something I have learned late in my life and paid a considerable price to learn. What you hold on to and what you let go of, that turns out to be everything. The cabin is mine. The kids are mine. The Sunday mornings are mine. The refrigerator covered in drawings is mine. That is enough. That is more than enough. If you're watching this and you're somewhere in the middle of something hard, something that feels like the ground keeps moving, I want to tell you what I told that man in my grief group. Get the information. Find out what's actually true, even if you're afraid to know, because you cannot protect what you don't understand, and you cannot fight what you haven't faced. And if someone has taken something from you, something that was yours, something that mattered, know that it is still worth going after, not because of the money, not because of the property, because of what it means. Because some things carry the weight of the people who came before you, and you owe it to them and to yourself and to whoever comes after to hold on. Like this video if any part of this landed for you. Subscribe to Chum Saga for more stories from people who didn't give up when they probably should have. And if you're going through something right now, leave a comment. You might be surprised how many people are sitting in the same parking garage. I'll see you in the next one. I've been thinking a lot lately about what it actually costs to trust someone. Not in the abstract way people talk about it, in the real way, the way where you hand someone the keys to everything you built, everything your wife helped you build over 38 years, and you walk away assuming it's in good hands because that's what family is supposed to mean. Derek didn't take from me because I was foolish. It took from me because I was grieving and tired, and because people who exploit grief are counting on exactly that combination. The morning Patricia died, I became a different kind of target, not because I was weak, because I was human. And there's a difference worth understanding. What I know now, that I didn't know then, is that integrity has a cost, whether you practice it or not. If you practice it, the cost is discipline. You slow down. You read the documents. You ask the question that feels uncomfortable. You make the phone call you've been putting off. Those things cost time, and they cost some relationships, and they cost the comfort of believing that everyone around you is operating in good faith. If you don't practice it, the cost is everything else. Derek made a choice over and over again, across 14 months, to look at a man who had just lost his wife and see an opportunity instead of a person. That choice didn't happen once in a dramatic moment. It happened in small increments, in paperwork, in explanations that were technically true, but pointed deliberately in the wrong direction. That's how most serious harm gets done. Not in one stroke. In a series of quiet decisions that each seem minor until you add them up. What kept me from losing everything wasn't cleverness. It was the willingness to face what I suspected instead of explaining it away. I sat with that discomfort for 4 months before I called Clifton. 4 months of noticing things that didn't add up and making excuses for them. The moment I stopped making excuses and started asking questions, the whole picture came into focus fast. That's the thing about the truth. It doesn't hide all that well once you actually look for it. Sylvia is the part of this I think about most. She signed documents she didn't fully understand because she trusted her husband the way I had trusted him. Her situation is not the same as mine, but the root is the same. We both extended trust further than the evidence warranted. The difference is she was deceived by someone she loved. That is a wound that heals differently than being deceived by a stranger. I don't carry anger about what happened. That surprised me. I thought I would. But anger at Derek feels like putting energy into a fire that isn't worth the fuel. What I carry instead is a kind of clarity I didn't have before. About what matters. About what doesn't. About the difference between what you own and what is actually yours. The cabin is mine. Not because my name is on the deed, though it is now, Because my father built it. Because Patricia is in the water off the dock. Because Emma will learn to fish from that same dock if I have anything to say about it. That's what mine means. And nobody signs that away in a quitclaim deed.